Hey everybody, I thought I would just do a quick video and then I was like, well, let's just do it live. That way if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain them and have a discussion here. But a recent rule change from the USPSA has come down from on high. And I was quite interested or intrigued by this rule change. Because it represents a significant departure from historical precedent or tradition within the sport of USPSA or IPSC, which of course is the overall international organization that USPSA falls under. I appreciate you guys joining in. So I've got right here a summary of all the change logs of the rules that were recently updated for the February 2024 rule book as of now. And like I said, one of these really jumped out at me because I'm going to point out exactly what that is and why from some of our organization's founding documents right from the beginning. So what is that? All right, and there's a bunch of changes, but many of these are clarification of wording, some administrative type things. There's a couple things in there that are somewhat noteworthy, but you should definitely check them out. If you're active in the sport, you should be aware of changes and things like that. But this one comes from 5.2.7.1. And what is that? Well, this is the section in the rule book that talks about shoulder holsters, which, who cares? I don't know anybody that even wants to shoot a match from a shoulder holster. The second thing it talks about in 5.2.7.1 is tie-down rigs. It's always used these quotes, as long as I remember, tie-down rigs, meaning holsters with a strap that ties or secures the holster to your leg, to your thigh, let's say, okay? So that has been now removed from the rule book. Not the shoulder holsters part, but the thigh rig or thigh strap portion of the rules. Essentially, my understanding is that if you were, active duty military or in law enforcement, and you under the exception in the rules for being able to show up to a match and use your duty gear, otherwise, all the rest of us, you couldn't use a thigh strap with your holster. And this goes back to the very beginning of this sport. And that's why this caught my eye, because that this is pretty interesting to me. So what do I have here? These documents. I've been super interested in the history of our sport for a good while now. And what these documents are is actually the Columbia Conference proceedings. What is the Columbia Conference? Well, the Columbia Conference, if you don't know, you should look it up. There's a bunch of history there you should read up on. And in fact, I got to give some credit to Carl Wren of krtraining.com, because he has made sure to, for all of posterity, put the Columbia Conference proceedings, or minutes, if you will, on his website, and make sure that it's there and that it's available for everyone to have access to and to go and read. So you can definitely you can search Columbia Conference proceedings, KR training, or Carl Wren, and you'll probably land on his website, where you can pull up this PDF and read it for yourself. And I've had this printed off, and this is something I reference many times because oh, hey Taylor, tuning in late, what's going on? So rule changes from USPSA. This just barely came out, I think today or yesterday, from USPSA headquarters, as far as some changes in the rules. And so I'm talking about which of those rules represents a huge departure from historical tradition in this sport. Alaska shooting, yes, thigh straps. So the thigh strap on, like a duty type holster that some people use, some officers and whatnot, that's what we're talking about. Those have been prohibited from USPSA competition and IPSC competition, IPSC competition, since the beginning of the sport. And that's right here in these original Columbia Conference proceedings or minutes So the Columbia Conference is when IPSC was founded. You had basically you had Jeff Cooper and a whole bunch of other pretty, knowledgeable and influential dudes get together in Columbia, Missouri in May of 1976. That's what's known as the Columbia Conference, and it is literally the founding of IPSC competition, which is why it's pretty. I think it's pretty important stuff to know. Our history. HK James PZ. Hey man, yes, thank you, appreciate it. Super well, man. Appreciate that very much. So Columbia Conference. It was a week-long affair. They got everybody together, and there were representatives from Japan and South Africa and other places all throughout the world. Great Britain, United Kingdom, New Zealand. I think there was a representative there. I think there was somebody from Mexico. All over the world, there were representatives that came all the way across the world to Columbia, Missouri, the middle of the country, at basically Jeff Cooper's invitation to put together the International Practical Shooting Confederation. And so this document is the record of what they did that week, all the different activities they did, including some shooting competitions that they did together, including who won those competitions. Like a name many of you are probably familiar with, like Ken Hackathorn, was one of the top performers, one of the top shooters at the Columbia Conference. And yes, Ken Hackathorn was at the founding of IPSC. So one of the big things they had to figure out was obviously bylaws and organizational rules and stuff for the organization. Number two, a rule set for competition, right? And so a lot of things were brought up, a lot of things were discussed, a lot of things were debated. I wish I could have been there. It would have been really fascinating to see, how this all came to be, and realize that the catalyst or the inspiration for even bringing all these men together from around the world to put together IPSC was it was a realization of all this competition that Jeff Cooper and other notables from as early as like the early 50s all the way up through 1976, they've been doing these, first it was leather slap matches, and then there was various combat pistol shooting leagues. And it just came, just kind of all came to a head where it was time to put together rules, right? So why is this removal of the restriction on thigh straps on holsters in USPSA so significant? Well, it's right here on page 3 of these Columbia Conference proceedings. In the section they're talking about rules of the sport. And it says right here, at the opening of the evening session, the conference declared itself ready to vote on the subject of tie downs. And that's what they referred to, the thigh strap on a holster as. A tie down is a device which binds the toe of a belt or hip pouch holster to the leg of the shooter. It is, and by the way, that definition is not all that different than the definition that was just removed from the rule book this week. In fact, that is right here, I think, on page 3 of these of the change logs. Yeah, Appendix A3, tie-down rig, a holster where any part is strapped or rigidly attached to a competitor's leg. That, according to the change log here, was deleted, right? That makes sense, because if we're no longer prohibiting it, there's no need for that definition to remain in the rulebook. So, tie-down is a device which binds the toe of a belt or hip pouch holster to the leg of the shooter. It is good in that it assures positive position of the holster on the draw. It is bad in that it is uncomfortable for daily wear. That could be debated, and obviously technology and products have gotten better over the years, and projects the image of Western movies. And this, I've read this many times, and this has always been fascinating to me as to why they didn't want to have tie-downs originally on holsters. It projects the image of Western movies, which the conference membership was anxious to avoid. So, there's something there about putting together this practical shooting sport and not wanting to have this image of like Western style movies be a part of that. And I've read a few things here and there about that further. But what's interesting to me is Like the leather slap matches specifically, like were a creation out of those old Western films as a manifestation of, in the 50s and 60s, like Western movies and TV shows were hugely popular, and they actually created the first leather slap match in Big Bear, California, as an opportunity. Like it was basically a big community, like not just the match, it was part of a larger, broader Big Bear, the town of Big Bear. It was a community like festival, and they're like, hey, what if we did a shooting match? And it was entirely like it was intended to be styled in the manner after these kind of quick draw, scenes, movie scenes. And so they created the leather slap matches, and it was hugely popular. I mean, it's honestly, you have to look back at that point in history and go, hey, it sounds maybe silly to some of us today, but it was actually because of things like that that we even have practical shooting sports as we know them to be today, because those were so hugely popular. People enjoyed them so much, and those leather slap matches ran for over a decade, better part of 2 decades. And they were so popular, and it got people interested in competition with a pistol in your hands. And that later, as I mentioned, morphed into the combat pistol shooting leagues. And then that's what morphed into IPSC. But there was something about not wanting to have that tie to the old Western movie style. Maybe a negative connotation, I don't know. I do think that I remember reading there's something in the 1970s where that was no longer as culturally, I don't know, just wasn't as popular, obviously. Here's another thing, though, too. It was pointed out that at least 2 service issue holsters in the world utilize the tie down. These are the U.S. issue holster of World Wars I and II, and the new duty holster of the German Border Patrol. And then it says the decision of the conference was unanimous. Tie downs shall be disallowed for serious major competition unless the holster is a government issue design in current use. This was amended to state that a tie down on a custom holster will be allowed provided it cannot be seen by spectators. In other words, tie downs which work on the belt or on the inside of the wearer's clothing will be permitted. That was later removed. As far as that little exception, in that tie downs of any kind on a holster, I don't know when that happened exactly, but tie downs of any kind in IPSC or USPSA competition, was that language was stricken from the rules entirely, and simply tie downs were not allowed. But the point here is that I was intrigued when I saw this change to Rule 5.2.7.1 to remove tie downs from the rule set as a restricted device, because it literally goes back to the beginning history of the sport, and that is not insignificant. And that's what I wanted to share with you this lovely evening. Thank you for joining. I see Quinn and Sean and Jason and Andrew. I mean, I'm not catching everybody, but really, really cool that you guys would tune in on your Friday evening and hear a brief history lesson as I understand it, as I've read it. I'm not an expert in this, but it's just something I'm intrigued by and something that I have looked into. And like I said, when I heard that rule was changed, I immediately went right to the beginning of the sport and thought, that's really interesting, because that's one of the earliest and oldest rules that's existed in the practical shooting sports. In fact, it's one of the few that specifically is called out in these Columbia Conference meeting minutes. And yeah, that's pretty interesting. Jason, very interesting history. They still shoot USPSA at that range every month. Yes, they do. Yeah, yes, they do. I think it'd be cool to. I've never actually been there, and I think I'd like to visit that range at some point, shoot a match there, or whatever, because I don't know. It's just sort of like a weird, like, I don't know. If you're interested in the history, I want to visit the places that are historically significant. So there you go. Anyway, that's all I got for you. I, just wanted to share that with you because I thought it was interesting, and Hope everybody's doing well. I know, guys, there's a lot of drama and things, in the sport, and there's lots of infighting, and there's definitely some improvements and changes that can be and need to be made organizationally into the sport itself. I mean, we all want it to grow, and we want it to succeed, and so yeah, we should do all the things that make that possible, that have the best interests of the sport at heart, and getting more people into it. So let me know when you want to go. Maybe we can get you teaching a class at or near there. Man, that would be cool. That'd be super cool. Yeah, heck yeah, man. Message me. Let's set something up. So anyway, I'm gonna sign on out of here. Good seeing y'all. Take care. Have a great rest of your evening.